Well, thank you so much for making the time to do this.
Of course.
So what I know about you, you are a serial entrepreneur, author, CEO of 100, which is an educational company, right? And then you founded Broadcasters. And then you're an olive oil producer.
That's correct as well.
So that one is very interesting. Where, how, why an olive oil producer? How did that happen?
It was a happy accident, and I'm a big fan of happy accidents in life. We bought a house in Italy 15 years ago, and I'm a big fan of Italy, and I love to go to Italy to think clearly, to reflect on life, to write books and so on. And we wanted to have a simple country house without too much land and so on. And we ended up having 3 hectares of land with 200 olive trees. And then you go like, oh shit, what should I do? But then I'm a foodie as well, and I thought that, okay, let's study how to make a really good olive oil, what is essential and so on. And it's been a tremendous journey, understanding is that where does the taste come from, where does the quality come from, learning to respect the nature and so on. And actually my next book, which is coming out next fall, is going to be about trees. And it's partly because of this olive tree fixation and so on. So I'm a big fan of growth. I'm a big fan of trees, how they grow and so on. So I genuinely love that.
I loved it too. It's just so random.
Yeah.
Well then, I wanted to ask you, what's your first and foremost passion? Because you've done so many things in your life.
Life.
So
that's my passion.
And that's why you've gone every which way?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say maybe also my passion is, I could be answering this in so many ways, but I'd say that maybe one of my passions is gratitude, meaning is that being deeply grateful about the world in which we are living, even if it's having problems and challenges and so on. I'm excited about the possibilities, what we can do here, what we can learn, what we can be excited about and so on and so on. So I'm passionate about things which I don't know.
Okay, which is...
So I'm for example, at the moment, I'm really passionate about animals like antelopes or octopuses and so on. I've been studying for the past 2 months the life of octopus, for example, is that how does it think, how does it operate and so on, and I love it. But I'm passionate about meditation, I'm passionate about Buddhism, I'm passionate about cooking, I'm passionate about good ingredients, about NHL hockey, about creativity and so on.
Wow,
so,
I love it.
Yeah.
Passionate about life, that explains a lot then.
Yeah.
Well, at what stage in your life did you become a public speaker? How did that happen?
that was another happy accident as well. I when I was maybe 20, 25 and so on, I had, I was producing TV shows and I said is that I want to be behind the camera. I don't want to be on stage. I'm not excited about that at all. And I love to be reading books, but I'm not excited about writing one myself. And I was really certain about that one. And now I've written 15 books and I've been giving hundreds of speeches, and I love both. And maybe one thing led to another. And for me, when you were asking about my passions, I'd say that one of my big passions is the clarity of thinking. Meaning is that I love to think well. Okay. Meaning is that I love to understand how my mind works. I love to understand how creativity works. I love to understand how you can motivate kids to learn sustainability and so on and so on. And I've noticed is that two easy ways to improve your thinking is write a book, because you have to think and think and think, and if you are sort of like demanding towards yourself, it might take 18 months, but you might come up with something which is valuable. And giving a speech is another really good way to sort of like improve your own thinking, because if you don't understand how you think, if you cannot explain it in a simple way so that kids or adults or pensioners understand something or whatever, then maybe there's a lack of clarity in your own thinking as well.
Okay.
So I sort of like love to think for so long that I can explain it in a way that everyone gets. And quite often when I'm giving speeches, people say that, it's interesting how you can simplify so well. And that's for me a beautiful compliment, because for me, anybody can be making simple things complex. But for me, I'm really excited about making complex things sound simple. They are never simple, but sound simple.
I love that. How has the transition from being live in person to going virtual been for you? Have you enjoyed it more?
It's been interesting. Again, being on both sides, we are having 100, which is producing online events as well, and it was a mind-blowing experience. We had our own summit last fall, and we had people participating from 82 countries.
Wow.
And then you have the feeling is that we have people from Uganda, from Venezuela, from Hong Kong at the same time, and you are doing it from your own sofa. And you go like, wow, this is actually quite cool. So I'm really excited about that aspect of all of this. But at the same time, giving a speech and so on, so much of the energy and so on comes from the feedback, from the laughters, from the questions, from the reactions, and you're kind of like missing something. But like in practically any of the things in life, it's not black and white. There are things which I enjoy tremendously, and then there are things which I kind of like somehow miss and so on. But I don't complain. It's been an extremely interesting experience, and I think that in the future it will be some sort of hybrid. So I cannot wait to give a proper speech on stage, but most likely I'm excited to continue doing some kind of online speeches as well. So not black and white, best of both worlds.
What's been your most memorable speech, like on stage? I'm assuming you've been into a lot of countries, presenting in a lot of countries.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing one speech in Sweden, for example, for an audience of 5,000, and having sort of like the amount of energy and the amount of light and so on that is coming in a truly big event, and so on. It's kind of like almost breathtaking once first time you go to the stage and you go like, I'm on the stage and wow. This is big and huge and so on. And then how do you kind of like relax? How do you stay in the moment? How do you get your confidence back and so on? It was a great one. And then the second time you are doing it, it gets easier. But the first time being kind of like on a big stage with the big audience and so on, the first moment is breathtaking. But I think that, it's so much about flow is that you kind of like almost, you have after 5 minutes and so on, you have the feeling is that this is going to be great. I know the stuff, they like me, the stage is looking great and so on. And once you have that kind of feeling, kind of like the flow feeling is that it's a great place to be. And so once you have a feeling is that I know what I'm doing, this is going to be good. The slot is exactly the right length and so on. That's a beautiful feeling. And then on the contrary, when you are on the stage and you have a feeling is that it's not going as well as I was hoping and so on. So kind of like, how do you get your act together on stage? That's another thing as well. And sometimes that happens as well. And so on, you have a feeling that, okay, not as good, but let's take this one and so on. And luckily, I've been giving speeches for 15 years and so on. And quite often I sort of like have some stories and some storylines and so on where I can have a feeling that, okay, the energy level in the audience is not as high as it should be. So I can kind of like say, okay, let's tell this story in between so that we can be boosting the energy as well.
Okay, so you're innovative during your speech.
Definitely. And sometimes I can, when I love to use huge amount of slides. So if I'm talking about, let's say that I have a speech, the slot is 30 minutes, I might be having 40 slides in 30 minutes, but they are practically only pictures and visuals and so on, text practically never. Okay. And quite often, I have a few places where I know is that actually, if I want to go slightly over in kind of like in the middle of the speech, I know that actually I might be stopping so that I'm leaving like 3 or 4 or 5 slides unshown, because I know that I can also stop in this one and so on. So I can kind of like manage the length quite well on stage as well.
Okay. Do you ever get nervous anymore? I mean, you said you get nervous in the beginning, like when you first started.
Yeah, and I think that you should. And also it's kind of like it's a slightly alarming sign if you are not getting nervous, because then you are not pushing yourself. And I was having a great discussion with Charles Leadbeater, who was selected the Intellectual of the Year and the Speaker of the Year in the UK. And I was having a dinner with him and asking from him is that what is the good ratio between new stuff and old stuff? And he said is that he's been using a 70-30 rule, meaning that 70% of the content should be something that you have been testing before, because otherwise it's not kind of like good enough and so on. But 30% should always be new ones, because otherwise you're kind of like not having the freshness yourself, meaning is that you are almost going in an autopilot. And I think that if you are adding things which you have not done, and if you are pushing yourself, the nervousness comes. But with the nervousness comes also sort of like the feeling of being present and being genuine and so on and so on. So.
What about when you present in different countries? Are you looking into the cultural differences? Like, do you adapt with those different cultures? Do you have an example story?
I try to, and I'd say that you have to be really humble, because quite often those cultural differences can be based on prejudice. So sort of like also making mistakes, trying to understand. I was leading a multinational company where I was leading creative teams in 17 countries, from India to Spain, from Italy to UK. And only after like 3 years discussing with those people on almost on a daily level, you start to understand is that actually this is the way the Indian mind or Italian mind works. And of course it's a oversimplification, because everyone are different and so on. But for example, now I've been living in Italy for 15 years, I've been working with Italians for 10 years and so on. Only now I have a feeling that I'm slightly starting to understand the Italian culture and so on. But I'd say that humbleness is key thing, is that you have to know is that I don't understand the culture, asking questions and improving and so on and so on. It takes a kind of like a lot of effort and a lot of mistakes as well, meaning that okay, I should have kind of like told the story slightly differently and so on. So humbleness is the key.
How does an Italian audience react to a presentation? Like in Finland, they don't really ask questions. Here, I'd say.
I mean, the whole culture is so different, because in Italy, for example, if you're asking for a short question is 3 minutes. And so on, and the whole thinking is that for them, for example, creativity happens always in a moment, meaning is that in Finland we try to do things in advance so that nothing unexpected happens. And in Italy, the whole culture is built is that we cannot do anything in advance, because it's a mystery and the creativity happens, you know, in the moment, in the moment and so on. So I'd say that the Italian culture is not so much about planning, it's more about seizing the moment, being present, reacting, and kind of like having the genuine dialogue with the people, being open for the changes and so on, which makes it actually an interesting one for a Finnish mind, because my mind is really organized. I really think the beginning, the middle of the end and so on, and if someone sort of like breaks that totally and so on, it's not a simple one, because you might have, for example, a sort of like really clear structure on your presentation, meaning is that this is the cliffhanger, this is how it goes, then this is the middle part, but it needs to have this one in order to have the finale and so on. Yeah. And if the audience with questions and whatever totally breaks that one, it's not a simple one to sort of like to get back to. And in Finland, it never happens, because in Finland, no one interrupts and practically no one has any questions at the end either. I was saying there was one professor coming from New York to one of our event, and she was asking from me is that, Saku, how much time do I leave for questions at the end of the presentations? Is 60 minutes enough? And I said is that this is Finland, 60 seconds might be too much.
Yeah, true.